All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Legal Tech Week, the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation from the past week, or possibly the last 2 weeks this time, because we weren't around last Friday. And I am Bob Ambrogi. I write the blog Law Sites and also have the podcast Law Next and the legal tech directory called directory.lawnext.com. Check it out. And our panelists this week, as you see them before you, starting from what I see as the upper left, Steve, that would be you.
Hi, Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads, and I'm also chair of the ABA Law Practice Division this year.
All right, and Niki.
My name is Niki Black. I am the Senior Director of SME and External Education in my case, and I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record, and I also author some benchmark and legal industry reports on the my case side of things.
All right, Victor.
Hi, everyone. Victor Lee from ABA Journal. I'm Assistant Managing Editor for the Business of Law and Technology. It's going to take me a while to get used to Niki's new title because at the Journal, we've had debates over whether or not we should actually refer to her by her old title, which was Tech Evangelist. A lot of people claim they're like, there's no way that's a real thing. I'm like, no, it's a real title. That's actually on her card. Like, no, we're not going with that. So thanks, Niki. Thanks for making our life more difficult.
Yeah, I can't get used to it. I like the old title so much better.
But nobody knew what I did. It was so nebulous.
I still don't know what you do with the new ones.
All right, fine.
And Stephanie.
Yeah, my title is easy. I'm Stephanie Wilkins. I'm the editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM.
All right. So in the news this week, well, actually, we might want to just, I don't know, we were just talking about it a little bit, but quickly debrief. I think Stephanie and I were the only ones who went to Relativity Fest last week. And the reason we didn't have a show last week is because we were probably both traveling out of Relativity Fest in Chicago. But I don't know, Stephanie, any quick impressions? What did you think of that conference?
Well, it was my first Relativity Fest, so I don't really have a basis of comparison, but I mean, I thought it was really well done. They obviously put a lot of effort into it. I personally have, a soft spot for all of the more social justice-y aspects of legal tech, and I thought they did a really good job of highlighting a lot of that, from the human trafficking documentary to, their closing keynote with Dr. Niki Brew, and just a lot of the non-traditional, the non-strictly traditional legal uses of the technology I enjoyed. And of course, the panel that Bob and I were on, I've told was a huge hit.
Yeah, we did a panel on the State of the Union, whatever that means. But that was fun. It actually was interesting that they did so much focus on human rights issues and other kind of social issues, ways that their technology is being used. I did an interview with somebody, and I think Joe is not here, sat in with me on the interview with some people from the Georgia Innocence Project who are using Relativity's technology for free from Relativity to basically go through. They've got a backlog of something like 6,000, letters they receive from people asking, take my case. They just can't humanly review all of that. And so they're basically using this, e-discovery review software to go through and review all of these petitions, and not so much to kind of surface single cases directly, but look for patterns in these cases that could suggest the cases that they want to talk about. They're talking about, like, they've noticed, for example, that there's like a particular county in Georgia that a whole lot of these wrongful conviction cases seem to be coming out of, or there are patterns in terms of law enforcement officers involved, or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
Yeah, the pattern recognition aspect of it was really what led to the human trafficking case that was the subject of the documentary. I wrote up about it. I actually interviewed them and privately to hear about how all that happened, and just the fact that they're using these pattern recognition softwares for these other purposes is great. And their whole Justice for Change partnership is focused on different things. And it's like you said, Bob, they give, for these particular cases, they give them the software to use for free to let the lawyers or the vendors or whoever is using it help these causes or these litigants that wouldn't otherwise, really, like a lot of David versus Goliath situations. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. The other thing that I found interesting about the conference, and this wasn't even so much my observation as I saw other people talking about this on Twitter, was you hardly ever heard the word e-discovery at this e-discovery conference. For a product that started as an e-discovery tool and that is still the most, probably by far the most widely used e-discovery technology out there, they don't talk about themselves as an e-discovery company anymore. Now, they're talking about themselves as a platform for all sorts of other things, and I thought that was really kind of interesting. As a matter of fact, there was one point I think at which one of the speakers kind of mentioned e-discovery and then kind of backtracked and changed the way they had phrased whatever it was they had said. I forget exactly what it was, but anyway. All right. Well, I kind of think we ought to start with having sent our intrepid reporter into the metaverse this week to explore the court system there. Niki, what did you find going off into the metaverse? So, I mean, give us some background. I mean, you've kind of been really exploring this for the last couple of weeks or so.
For like a week, because here's my goggles, because Dennis Kennedy, who's here today, a couple shows ago, suggested that I might like the metaverse more than I think I would. And with, one of the veteran legal tech, when a veteran legal tech person suggests that to me, I jumped right on it. So I immediately bought my goggles within a few days. Didn't take much. And I've been getting my metaverse, what do you call it? Like metaverse legs, for lack of a better word. It definitely makes you sick in the beginning. But so initially I was just trying to figure it out. And once I'd sort of figured it out and discovered a few virtual worlds, I tried to see, is there a law firm here? And I did find a law firm, a very generic law firm. There was no one in it, but it even had a bathroom, and I went into the bathroom and you could turn the water on. So there is a generic law firm in Horizon's world, which is Facebook's version of a virtual world. And then I discovered something called MetaCourt, and I went to that a couple days ago, and court was not in session. I thought it was just another sort of dead, just a holding place that someone had created that looked like a court. And then yesterday, last night, I stumbled into MetaCourt, and court was in session, and it was a very different experience. There were about 40 people there, at least, and there's a court with a judge, and then there's jury box, 2 witness boxes, and then there's tables for the defense and the plaintiffs, and then there's a barrier. So if you are behind the barrier in the peanut gallery, you cannot, they cannot hear you. So everyone up behind the barrier, like the actual court session, everybody can hear them, but they can't hear you if you're in the peanut gallery, like sitting there watching court. And you can't get by that barrier unless they give you permission. So when I arrived, there was a trial going on, and I've since learned that apparently they create scenarios and they discuss them ahead of time, and then they have them ready for each court session. And the people that participate volunteer to participate. Everyone rushes up when the door opens to try to get in there to participate in the court session. And so everyone, when I got there, had already been assigned to their court sessions, to their positions. There's a stenographer who sits there the whole time and does this, and occasionally reads back the record when people ask for it, because people ask for it. There's a bailiff, there's a judge who seemed to have a decent amount of legal knowledge. There were a bunch of jurors, and then there were counsel for each side, and the plaintiff and defendant each as well. And the particular case had something to do with, there was some video that was at issue. And at one point they asked the judge managed his court proceedings quite well. And they asked if someone would be the expert witness, a cybersecurity analyst. So I raised my hand. And so I was the cybersecurity analyst. I went up there and sat in the jury box, and the attorney came up to me and asked me to take a look at a video and let me know if it had been altered. But I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say because I didn't have enough of a background. So I asked, who submitted this into evidence? And the judge told me that it was the other, was my person questioning me. And so I said, oh, it doesn't look like it's been altered. And everyone erupted, like everyone in the front of the thing. And then the judge was like, oh, I told her wrong. It was the other side that admitted it. I was like, oh, it's clearly been altered. And everyone's like, oh. So the judge turns to the jury and says, you are to disregard the prior testimony. That was my fault. And you're only to listen to the testimony she just provided. It was like actually giving them like legitimate instructions. But so it was hysterical. And then the case concluded, and I don't remember who won. And then they opened it up for the next case. And it was like a stampede to get into the box so that people could participate. And a little bit after that, I left. But it was hysterical how prepared they were, how familiar some of them were with some of the proceedings. And then it was just fun. Like sometimes you go into the metaverse and you end up in a room, like a place where there's not a lot of people or everyone's awkward and they're new. Because there was a structured format and a plan and a goal, it was a ton of fun to be involved in this thing and watch what was happening. So I thought that was fabulously, I thought it was really interesting. And I think that overall, just the interaction in the metaverse, I think there's actually a ton of potential, even though Facebook's getting a lot of negative press about it right now. I think in a quarter or two, you're going to see the numbers completely flip on their head. It just takes a while for people to get on board, especially with the new Pro goggles coming up, but they're very expensive. But so anyway, I'm glad I'm diving in, and I think there's a lot of legal implications, which I wrote about in my article, getting back to what I actually am talking about here. It's just like social media was back in the day. You know, you need to understand it because there are actual people there interacting, and there is evidence being generated that's going to need to be obtained and analyzed. And there are also quite possibly, you know, tortious things happening there down the road, like litigation can happen. And you can also potentially set up shop. And I would suggest like almost like a web intake portal for now, so that people can at least approach your firm and submit a, you know, intake form. So, you know, they're interested in talking to you about your services. So I think there's a ton of potential there. And I think it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. So that's my report from the metaverse.
Everybody's speechless.
No, I love it. Yeah, no, I would love to try it. I'd be curious to see if it actually has an application down the road. And even though you said there could be tortious things going on there, because, you know, there's already been claims of virtual sexual assault in the metaverse and things like that. So while it is fun, and I really would love to join you in one sometime, because I think that's really fun. Like, I don't know how. It'll be curious to see if anyone could figure out how to make it actually work.
Yeah, I mean, we did like we did an article about this where we looked at some of the legal issues, and obviously it's like, yeah, you have the assault issues. There's like possible defamation issues, like if my avatar says something bad about somebody, like what happens. And IP issues obviously are really a big deal because of like all the logos and stuff. They want to make it look like a real place. But yeah, I mean, like I spoke with on the Legal Rebels podcast with Legal Talk Network. I spoke with a lawyer who set up shop in the metaverse, and I think right now it's still very much still kind of like, I mean, he's using it more for like, you know, for marketing and for and actually there was a practical use of it, and we talked about it on the show like, way back when it happened, like when it happened during during the pandemic when things were still shut down. You know, there was a way for people to you know, get together and you know, meet up with meet somewhat face to face and like you know, provide advice and that kind of stuff. So it was a service for his clients too. But I'd be curious to see where it goes. Like you know, I mean, it seemed like the court stuff was more just for fun, but at some point, yeah, it would be interesting to see like an actual trial unfold and see how it goes.
Well, at the very least, you can see how hearings, you know, perfunctory kind of hearings that, you know, their motion hours and all that could be done that way. I know that there's that lawyer in California, Mitch Jackson, and he's written a lot of stuff and big proponent of it. I haven't watched it yet, Nikki, but I'm going to. Your court experience.
I just got a couple of videos of MetaCourt, and I sent it to you guys by email. I can put the links in the chat after the segment's done, so people can take a look at them if they want. So.
But Niki, I know you're always concerned about privacy and about data tracking and data privacy. How do you feel about the fact that everything you do in the metaverse is being tracked by Facebook and used to sell products for you?
Well, I think that right now it absolutely needs to be recorded, which is one thing that they do, because I can't tell you how many 11 and 12-year-olds, one of them put me in a private party, like with an 11-year-old. I'm like, I don't want to private party. You know, how do I get out of there? And they're just like, these kids there's a ton of kids just wandering around in there talking to grownups. And I'm glad it's being recorded, because you know, and then they're sad when you leave because I think they're just bored and they just want someone to hang out with them and be nice to them. But there's a lot of opportunities for predators there. So I think right now it needs to be recorded. The issue of tracking and using it to market to you, that's a very different issue. But I mean, I think at this point it's just inevitable.
I'm not just talking about recording. I'm not just talking about recording what happens there, but the idea, I mean, from what I've read, they're tracking things like what kinds of things draw your attention, what are you looking at, how do you respond to different things, and they're using that all as, you know, potential data to help drive sales and advertising.
So Bob, how is that different than real life?
Right.
It's not any different than what Facebook is doing already.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like at this point, they've got such strong profiles on all of us, unless you literally don't use the internet, that it's just part of the buy-in for any kind of electronic online interaction. That's just the price you pay. You are the product, right? I think so.
Yeah, but you're more the product when you're in an immersive environment where you can interact with people in a way that, you know, goes beyond what you can do through Facebook communications or something. I think I don't know.
I agree. I think it's just you know, you sign the terms of use and you sign away your rights, and that's the end of that. If you're going to be in there, that's the price you're paying. I think.
All right. So. When we were talking about this in our pre-webinar chatter, Stephanie said, well, gee, we ought to do a panel in the metaverse one day. And we actually did do a virtual reality version of this show once, which was a lot of fun. And anybody who missed it, there's the link in the chat if you want to go back and see it. But that was part of, was it the ILTA? Not ILTA conference. It was Mary Mac's ASED's conference, I think, one year.
I think it was the Monroe County Bar, because I watched a little bit of it.
That's it.
That's where it was. That's what it was.
My bar
Monroe County Bar. That's what it was. Yeah, that's right. It was your bar. That's right.
Mary Mac did one, something like that too.
Yeah.
I remember. But it was the Monroe County Bar.
That's right. Because now that when you look at the video, you see the big MCBA in the background. So that's right. All right. Well, that's all we have to say on the metaverse. We're sure we're going to fill out the entire hour just talking about that, but that's okay because there's lots of other stuff to talk about. Victor, you had an interesting story this week that kind of echoes some themes that we've hit on a few times here in the past, but you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So kind of in relation to the Alex Jones thing. So this kind of falls into the category of, you know how to use your technology, especially if you're a lawyer, because you never know what could happen if you turn something over or that you shouldn't, or, you know, in this case, it wasn't a lawyer that gave away an entire hard drive. It was a Dropbox links that they forgot to deactivate, or they forgot to, or they just forgot to let expire or whatnot. So basically, this was I think this was originally reported by Politico, but one way that there was a hold on, let me just put it in the chat here, everyone, so people have it. So basically, what it was that John Eastman, who's a lawyer, one of the lawyers who was on Trump's side and trying to come up with this scheme of you know, all kinds of ways to kind of, you know, decertify or question or call the 2020 election into legitimacy or things like that. He's being investigated by the January 6th committee and also by I think by grand juries as well. And so what happened was his lawyer based on this reporting did not know that a Dropbox links was still active, giving people access to all these emails and letters and stuff, which you know, was all these emails, letters, and things like that, which were able to then, you know, link him and various people to parts of January 6th. And so, you know, I mean, obviously there's you know, obviously, you know, like, you know, we're seeing more states and jurisdictions requiring training in technology and training knowledge of technology and competence in that area and whatnot. And this might be a good way to kind of maybe force people to take it more seriously. I mean, you know, it's one thing to do it accidentally, but it's one thing to just do it in a litigation field where, you know, you have ways of clawing stuff back and being able to pull things back and and make things privileged after the fact. But, you know, in a case like this where, you know, it goes to the January 6th committee, and there's not that same level of it's not like ongoing litigation, and there's, you know, maybe there's the rules are a little bit murkier, like you know, obviously then there could be serious consequences, and it looks like there might be.
Yeah, I feel like there was even, I was trying to find it, I couldn't find it. I feel like there was an ethics opinion at some point related to this issue, because there was something that came up a few years ago, very similar in context, where the lawyer basically forgot that they were sharing a particular Dropbox folder with other people and started putting stuff in there that was not like this case, not implicating significant confidential information or something, but that was embarrassing, frankly, or personal anyway. And it's so easy to lose track of things that you shared and who you shared them with. And it's a good reminder to just kind of go in and check all of your folders every so often and see about that.
Yeah, and especially a program like Dropbox. Like, I mean, like, you know, I guess depending on what program you use, like, you never know what the protocols are. You never know what the policies are. You know, maybe some things expire like immediately, or there's an automatic expiration thing on them. But some of them, maybe you have to change the settings and make it so that you know, you disable it once you're done sharing it. So you always have to be careful with what you use. Make sure you understand the rules, and make sure you understand that, you know, not everything is just gonna just happen automatically. Sometimes you might have to go in and actually change the settings, or make it so that you know that the stuff isn't going to get shared accidentally.
Yes, somewhat relatedly, I think the ABA came out with a formal opinion maybe this past week on the reply all issue, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I haven't read it, but it seemed to say that if I hit reply all to an email that Bob sends to me and Bob copied his client, I'm not really creating an ethical violation by contacting Bob's client, which I guess makes sort of practical sense. But it's the same kind of issue in some ways.
Yeah, I did write about that one just this morning, as a matter of fact. I'll put that post up. But it was an interesting opinion. It was, you kind of wonder why doesn't the ABA Standing Committee on Ethics have anything more important to talk about than reply alls on emails? But
it happens.
Well, I know it happens.
I know people have been fired for like. I know someone who got fired for replying all and saying bad things about people on that all chain that they shouldn't have, because they thought it was just going to the one person. So yeah, it's definitely an issue.
Yeah, I mean, the issue in this case was if I'm a lawyer and I'm emailing my opposing counsel and I copy my client on the email, then if that lawyer hits reply all to respond to me, is that other lawyer somehow doing something unethical by communicating directly with my client, because they're not supposed to do that? But, and you know, the ABA opinion says no, because the lawyer who sent the email, it was their fault basically that this communication chain started that way. Apparently there have been some state ethics boards that have decided the issue the opposite way. But it's like, as I said in my post, I feel like so many of these issues that come down in the world of legal ethics are just like common sense. Like, just think about it before you do it, and you probably wouldn't do it. I mean, why do you even necessarily want to copy your client on an email to your opposing counsel? If you want the client to see the email, then forward it to them after you send it, but don't copy them on it. You never know what's going to come back in return.
And I think that's why, I mean, the way I was reading the ABA thing was that they didn't even get to the issue of, is it ethical for then you to reply and reach out? It was more so just the lawyers being like, don't be dumb and reply all with your clients on it. Like, just nip that problem in the bud, because it shouldn't really be a problem at this point in time.
Right. Yeah. Don't be dumb. Rule 1.1 of the ethics: don't be dumb.
I mean, you could say that about Dropbox also, but you know.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Well, let's see. All right. Steve, you wrote about some very well-paid lawyers this week. This week.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. The Major Lindsay and African Law 360 survey of partner compensation, and of course, the big headline everybody picked up on was that partners made a hell of a lot of money last year, which I guess they did. But there's some other interesting things in there that are a little bit, as Jeffrey Brandt scolded me on. I got a little off the trail, but picked some of them up. But one of them was an economic issue. Most of the increase in compensation likely came from increased revenues due to increased work, which is really all well and good. But then you look at the rate increases in 2021, and it was about 5% on average, which, if that were true in 2022, is certainly not going to keep track with inflation, which could signal some additional cost-cutting measures that would be in order, and maybe we're already seeing that. The other thing I thought was interesting was the origination credits or originations that the people who responded noted, and those were only slightly up from the previous year. And so, the old adage is, when a lawyer is really, really busy, they spend their time working on business development, and that seemed to be the case here. So it could be the firms could be setting themselves up for a difficult year next year. And of course, hell hath no fury like a partner who makes less in year two as they did in year one. It's a very difficult situation management wise. The other sad thing that I've noticed in it is the gap between men and women partners. While it's, everybody was sort of patting themselves on the back that it wasn't as much as it has been, 34% pay gap that's pretty significant. When you start putting real numbers on that, you see, $34,000 less if a male partner makes 100, then female partner doing roughly the same work. I mean, there's no way to distinguish how they're different. They make 66,000, and it just, it's a very sad commentary when overall in the income universe, the gap is not as great as 34%. Its average is around 20%. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. But, I just think it's, for a profession that prides itself on sense of justice, there's just no excuse for that. The other thing that I thought was really interesting compensation-wise was that partners in open compensation systems where they know what all of their partners are going to make, across as a whole did better compensation-wise than those in closed systems. And the only thing I can figure from that is that, having all your partners know exactly what you're being compensated kind of keeps the system honest and precludes, the big ogre in the corner from raking in all the profits and leaving the crumbs to everybody else. That's the only thing I can figure about it. But I thought I'd never focused on that or noticed a survey that focused on that before. So all of those things I thought were pretty interesting, and don't necessarily have anything to do with the fact that partners made a lot of money last year, which of course they did. But so it was an interesting survey, I thought.
One thing that I find interesting about that also is the ramifications of women earning less. So if you're earning less and you're getting screwed by your law firm, which I think most women tend to understand that's happening, and that's oftentimes the reason that women will leave law firms when they have children, or else they know they're not going to get a fair shake once they have the kid, or else they start to get reduced assignments or whatever the case may be. And then I think one thing that happens too that isn't always talked about is if you leave the law for just 2 or 3 years, the effect, and then you get back into the workplace, the effect that can have on your retirement account, and how far behind you end up being. I mean, that happened to me. I left for 2.5 years when my kids were really little. And my husband's retirement accounts are significantly higher than mine, because for those 2.5 years, he was contributing to his retirement account and it was getting matched by his employer. And I've been playing catch up ever since. I mean, I think at this point I've exceeded what he has, but those 2.5 years and that compounding interest that I would have had, I've lost all of that. And I think it happens to a lot of women. And you also lose the money being paid into Social Security too, unless you make up for that. So there's all these other ramifications of that type of inequality that happens that women suffer.
Yeah, it's, they never, you can never catch up. I mean, it's back to life. And the other thing that the survey noted was that men's originations are significantly higher than women's, and which is also a sad commentary, because either one of two things are happening. Either the origination rules within the firm are 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 rigged toward men, and not we're going to pay men more, kind of, or we're going to give men more origination credits. But the way those rules often work is they favor those with credits, and those are working for those with credits. So either that's happening, or the hiring by in-house counsel and businesses is geared toward men. So, a white male in-house counsel typically will hire a white male lawyer who will get the origination. So therefore men's originations are higher. And either one of those is a sad commentary. I don't think you can lay it at the feet and say, well, women just aren't good business developers, because that's not true. So it's a lot of, like you say, Niki, a tremendous amount of ramifications from that. It's not just, oh, we're doing marginally better this last year, so we should all be happy. I don't think that's a good attitude at all. I think it's like, oh my God, it's still as bad as it ever was, kind of thing.
It all strikes me as kind of profane. I mean, some of these partners are just making so much money, and that women are still getting paid so much less than men in law. I just don't understand it. Does the report offer any clues as to why this is?
No, other than the origination credit issues. And another piece of it was a comparison of equity and non-equity partners, and you see a big discrepancy in compensation there. And the survey didn't go into this, but I would not be surprised to see that there are more women non-equity partners than maybe even men.
Right.
There definitely are. That's typically the track that women get pushed into, because they're unable to be rainmakers, especially when they have younger children. So they get pushed into this non-equity thing where they're doing the actual work, meaning, I know that the practicing law encompasses all different aspects of work, but the grind, the research, the writing, but not the glory. They're never in court. They're never arguing. They end up just doing all this work that makes the cases move forward. And they get stuck into that oftentimes. So they can't even get out there and do rainmaking, because they end up just in the office all day long and never get out of it. So other studies I've read that absolutely say that women are primarily the non-equity partners these days in most of these firms. I don't know the exact percentage, but
we're talking big for. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know the stats either, but you, not as women versus men, I feel like within the global sphere of women partners, so many of them are non-equity as opposed to equity, even if you look at just the women, for exactly the reasons Niki was saying.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think it's interesting because it's like, obviously, whenever we look at these stats, or whenever we get like a press release or whatever, or something about that, it's always like, oh, the number of partners went up. It's like, all right, but were they equity partners or non-equity partners? That's it's the devil's in the details, right? But it's always like, oh well, we've promoted this many people. Our incoming class is the most diverse we've ever had, blah blah blah. But nobody ever talks about the origination credit stuff. Like, oh, we reformed our origination credit policy so that it's more equitable. Because I think a lot of people don't really understand that. Because it's easy to just try out numbers and be like, oh well, half of our class is this, or a third of our class is this, or blah blah blah, or we have this many first chairs, we have this many people on the leadership committee, we hired a chief diversity officer, and blah blah blah. But nobody ever talks about the origination credit. So it's kind of like, is it because people don't really know what it is and it's kind of boring, and it kind of gets lost in the shuffle, or is that the way to kind of keep things the way they are?
You're right. I mean, origination credits, in large part, in most firms, govern compensation. The person that brings in the most business, and then that's not necessarily conceptually unfair, right? I mean, you're bringing in dollars to the business, so maybe you should get paid more. But the problem is that the rules for determining who gets those credits can be so arcane and so biased that they favor people that are powerful with large origination credits and those that work for those partners, so that you move up, you ratchet up in the hierarchy and ultimately become partner, and you may be grandfathered into a bunch of origination credits that you may or may not have been in an equitable world entitled to, which tends to favor white men. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I think that's why I think when, you asked about, what the reason for it is, I think that's squarely an origination issue.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, we're talking about the world of big law firms, not
Right.
small law firms.
That's
here.
right.
So
Right.
it'd be interesting to know what kind of trends had been, billing trends had been in small law firms. Although I think the Clio survey had some data on that. And I don't know if Niki, I know you were working on a survey for my case. I don't know if that had any data on that, but I think overall it was showing that billings were up for smaller firms too.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't break it down by firm size in terms of that information. So I don't know.
Yeah. Stephanie, you had a couple of stories this week. What do you want to talk about?
We can do the Streamline AI one. The other one was just the Q&A with Judge Schlegel about virtual courts, just sort of contrasting to Niki's Metaverse courts. But that's just, I know some of you experienced that court in person before. That was just sort of a last minute add-on that I thought of because that just coincidentally came out today. But yeah, Streamline AI, speaking of women in law, in legal tech. Kathy Zhu and her new venture with the no-code intake platform with Julian Wimbush. They got a lot of funding, including Wilson Sonsini investment. And it seems to be, it's still amazing to me that there are these areas of, something like intake is such a basic part of a case, of a matter, yet still so important that I feel like a lot of people might have focused on the bigger later aspects of it. And then it took till now for somebody to do a no-code streamlined intake platform.
Yeah, and to be clear, they're talking about intake within legal departments, right? Not law firms.
Yes, sorry, legal departments, yes.
Yeah, it seemed like a really interesting idea. It's funny how some of the more interesting innovations are happening within legal departments these days rather than in law firms. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I didn't get a chance to fully read I read it quickly, but what exactly what are they doing with it? How are they? What's the thrust of the product?
Well, one of the big focuses is that, I haven't tried it out and compared it, but that it really is no code as opposed to, there's a lot of pushback about, is no code really no code, or is it just a little bit of code? And they claim it's, really no code. And it's just a lot about her experience at DoorDash, where she just had no processes for all of these, putting all the contracts together, the agreements and all of it, every single time a transaction would come up. And she just finally decided they needed to all be in one place. And it just, it's not really even that nuanced. It seems fairly obvious, but clearly not obvious enough that anyone had done it before. Yeah. There's just like a huge gap in the market that people were overlooking in terms of, because there was, there's dedicated CLM, there's contracting solutions, there's billing, there's all the different aspects of containing and running a matter within the legal department, but actually bringing it all together to start the matter in the first place.
Yep.
I think what's interesting is that there's so many more of these products for the legal departments coming to fruition. And I think part of it is, and I don't know quite as much about this space, so correct me if I'm wrong, others on the panel, but, the companies, corporations are getting tired of paying outsourced legal fees, outside counsel, because they're so expensive. They're, and they have these outlandish bills. And so they're starting to build these firms out within their companies rather than having to outsource a lot of this legal work. And as these more and more firms get built into all these different companies, they need more and more processes because they're handling more work and they have more people handling it. And so they actually have these like firms within the companies that need, but their needs are different than a traditional firm because, they're working for a company and handling a whole assortment of different types of areas of practice, but all within that same one firm rather than having practice groups and these large law firms and the intake's different. And so their needs are just very different. And I think that as that trend grows and increases, the need for software to support that legal work tends to increase. And so that's my hypothesis. Definitely not my space.
No, I think you nailed it. I think you're right. You're spot on with that. Yeah.
Well, and especially now, I think she brought up when she was talking to us about it is, a lot of people now with this, everyone keeps talking about an impending recession and is now the time to start a legal tech startup or create a product. And she's like, in a situation like this, where something like intake, there is so much work to do and you're getting fewer and fewer resources and constantly being asked, as someone said in the comments, to do more with less. Now is the perfect time for that particular kind of product to launch, because it's going to fill that gap when you don't have the workforce to do it and clients don't want to pay for it. Or I mean, nobody wants to pay for this kind of work. I always default to law firm brain, sorry. Yeah.
The question in the...
Yeah, there's a question to hosts and panelists. That one.
Yeah. Do you want to read it, or do you want? You can read it. It says, do you foresee a decrease in legal operations hiring and initiatives due to the recession? I think the answer is it depends, but not really, because when a recession hits, just different types of practice areas spin up and take them in a lot more business, like bankruptcy and that type of thing. But again, I'm not 100% sure. What do you guys think?
I was also going to say, I was going to also say it depends, because everyone, as far as I can tell, currently defines legal ops a little bit differently, and it looks different in every organization. So I don't even know what legal ops hiring, if there is a uniform thing for that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with what Stephanie said. I mean, I think that if you define it as like, okay, this legal ops, we're going to use legal ops to, like, it depends what you use it for, right? If you use it to, to run your business more efficiently, then yeah, you could definitely see how that would be useful during a recession when there's less money coming in and whatnot. Like, you definitely want to make yourself more efficient and being able to do more with less resources and whatnot. So that I could see. But like, if you define legal ops as sort of like, differently and then you run the risk of of not having enough resources or having to spend too much money on stuff, then yeah, I could definitely see that part of it then going away or contracting. I mean, it really is, it's really kind of in the details, and of course, look, there'll be some companies that just cut companies and law firms and whatnot. They just cut across the board, and they don't care what you do or what you bring to the table. So I think it all depends.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on this. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead. That's okay.
I was going to say, I'm not an expert on this either, but that didn't stop me from recently chairing a panel on this very topic of legal ops hiring and career opportunities for above the law. I mean, the experts on the panel, not me, but I mean, their thought was pretty much what Victor just said, which is that, in tougher times or leaner times, there's a greater need for efficiency, a greater need for enhancing operations, and that that alone can mean more opportunities for legal ops professionals, and then also just that that can also put greater pressures on the recessionary times can put greater pressures on legal departments to do more in-house and send out less, which again fuels a continuing need for legal ops professionals to be sort of the back end for all of that work. So it's probably not going to lead to cutbacks in opportunities.
The point I was going to make is falling back to the study that I wrote about. The biggest increases in compensation to partners was, of course, in mergers and acquisitions, but the second biggest category was litigation. And that's interesting because every litigator I talk to these days are just overwhelmed with work and trials, because it's the proverbial pig and the snake. And so they're all scrambling, which means, I mean, that you talk about law firms and lawyers and law firms being efficient or not efficient because of billable hour model. The one thing that scares them more than losing billable hours is not complying with court deadlines. So if they have to become more efficient and use more efficient means, including legal ops, to comply with all these deadlines that they're all facing from multiple trials set on top of each other to clear out the docket, then I think there will be a greater opportunity.
Yeah, and like you never know, right? I mean, because I think when when COVID first hit, we thought, oh, well, bankruptcies are going to go through the roof. I mean, so many companies are going to go out of business. So many people are going to have to declare personal bankruptcy or whatnot. And I think there was a little bit of a bump, but not as much as people thought. And part of it was government intervention to kind of stave off some of the stuff. But then like the economy is complicated. There are all kinds of pieces, all kinds of factors that can swing things one way or the other. So, it's I think like conventionally, will there be people that just go into cut mode? Sure. Because that's probably all they know how to do, and that's always the easiest solution to things, right? But I think like, I mean, if you define legal ops as like a more like kind of a luxury thing that like companies do to kind of make themselves look good and make themselves look like they're going with the times, and I could see that part of it suffering.
Yeah. All right. My story this week that I wanted to talk about was this Filevine news, which I wrote about. I'm sure some of you others wrote about it as well. But they announced, Filevine is a practice management platform more focused on. Started out as more focused on plaintiffs, mass tort firms. I think they're definitely trying to move beyond that into other markets, including corporate. But they put out this news this week that they are developing their own proprietary document format called the .vine format that they say will replace Microsoft Word and Google Docs in the legal industry. And in fact, there was a quote from the CEO saying this is going to become the new standard for the legal industry, replacing word processors that are ill-equipped for the job, and a lot of hyperbole in their press release about them becoming the new standard and replacing Microsoft Word and Google Docs. I don't know if this is I'm still on the fence as to whether this is a bad idea or bad marketing and PR around a good idea. I feel like it's a bad idea for the reasons I put in my blog post, only because I think the trend overall in the legal industry is towards more open standards, towards more interoperability, and this seems to be putting a stake in the ground around a proprietary format that would go counter to that trend, and then it sort of makes it sound like it's going to be kind of easy to oust Word as the primary document format, which it could happen, but it's not going to happen anytime soon, and it's not going to happen from a single company that is itself a practice management company. I mean, if this was sort of a generic, I don't know, Apple or Microsoft kind of a company, maybe it would have more of an opportunity to put forward its own proprietary file format. But for this to gain the kind of traction they're touting here, it would mean all their competitors would have to adopt their format, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. So I don't know. I just, again, I'm kind of on the fence as to whether they should just fire their PR firm or what. But I don't know. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's certainly ambitious PR. But my first reaction was a point that you made in your post, Bob, that was like, even Google couldn't take down Microsoft Word. Like Google Docs, you can't even really get lawyers to use that. So it's really, really steep battle to try to, take over Microsoft Word. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if Filevine doesn't think it's smarter than me and change my formatting, maybe I will go for it. But because Microsoft Word clearly has all these issues that everyone hates, but somehow they have this stranglehold. But yeah, I'm curious. It's very ambitious. I don't know how it would happen, but I'd like to see someone try it.
Makes me think a little bit about Apple and Microsoft. I mean, if you look at a lot of lawyers use Apple laptops and tablets, but in their businesses and their law firms and their legal departments, they ain't using iOS. They're using Microsoft as the primary tool. And so, Microsoft offers a whole family, particularly now with Teams, of tools and devices that are all, I was going to say seamlessly integrated. That might be a bit of an overstatement.
Right.
But,
yeah.
I mean,
but
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was done. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm as big of an Apple guy as anyone, but like, yeah, I sprang for the Office. I sprang for the Office suite, the App Store, because it's just, because ultimately it's just like, is it the best product that's ever been made? No, but is it good? Is it good enough to get most things done? Yeah, I think so. And plus, we're also used to it. I think that it's hard to. It's hard to learn anything new, but especially like something like that where you just want something that's serviceable, that's going to get the job done. I'm kind of with you on this one, Bob. I feel like it's good to have goals, and it's good to sell yourself. Then it's good to not sell yourself short, I guess. But like if you're gonna make a bold statement like that, and then you come up short, or you don't come anywhere close to like making it happen, then I feel like it makes you look bad. And if right off the bat you're talking about like dethroning like one of the most obvious like workplace monopolies that we've had in the last 30 years, like, well, good luck.
Although I am tempted to reflect on Word Perfect, and once upon a time we would all be saying the same things about Word. This is Microsoft; they'll never take over this market. Word Perfect is so ingrained in blah blah blah.
Some lawyers still use Word. Some lawyers still use. Some courts still require Word Perfect. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say was that what I thought about with this, I think there is room for other word processing tools that are more specific to legal. So, for example, people do still prefer Word Perfect. Why do they prefer? Because their admins prefer it, and their admins won't switch. Also, Scrivener. I don't know if I've written about Scrivener before years ago because I used it to write one of my books. And lawyers use Scrivener sometimes because it's a program that is much better designed for complex writing. So I had suggested if you're writing a complex summary judgment motion, it's great because you can include all these links. At the time, it was harder to do that online using like word processing. But Scrivener is really not designed for legal writing, but it's great for that. So I think that there is some room for other products. I certainly don't think they're going to take over the market. And honestly, I think their biggest hurdle are the admins. You can talk about this all you want, but if they don't want to get on board, they're not getting on board unless you're in a really large firm that's going to force the matter. Most of them run the firm in a lot of their own ways, especially the smaller firms as you get into smaller firms. And that's going to be the biggest hurdle, is getting administrative assistants to agree to use anything other than what they already know how to use. They're the ones in it every single day, all the time. So it's going to be.
That's why I'm so unclear about whether this is just bad PR, because they're not really touting this. The press release is a little vague, and I haven't had a demo yet. I've got a demo scheduled next week with it at some point, so I haven't seen it yet. But if it sort of sounds like it's really just a document assembly program that they've created here, not a full word processing program. And it's one thing to develop a proprietary format around a document assembly software. It's another thing to say we're going to oust Microsoft Word and Google Docs. And whether the developers of this product, would have phrased it the same way the press release phrased it is a question I have in my mind. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what this actually is and how having this. And again, just from the chatter on Twitter, a lot of people say, well, if you look at what they list as the benefits in the press release, you can pretty much do all of that with other applications that are already out there. There's nothing particularly unique about it. So we will see, I guess.
No, I'm curious to hear after you try it out what it's like, because I totally agree with Niki that there is definitely room here. And was it in, I don't remember if it was actually in the press release or your post that quoted the press release, but I mean, I read both, but it's been a bit, where whoever said, lawyers shouldn't be preparing their motions in the same software that 8th graders use to write their papers or something like that, which is, completely, I mean, it's a completely valid point, but again, jumping from there to we're going to unseat Microsoft Word is incredibly, possibly a bridge too far.
Well, I would suggest it's 8th graders use the software that lawyers use to send out motions, not the other way around. Word wasn't designed for 8th graders. It was designed, Word was designed for complex documents, not term paper. You know what I mean?
But I guess the argument is that by now 8th graders have mastered Word and Word Perfect. So maybe lawyers need something more because the technology has gone farther.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that there's room for a better word processor, or there's one that's more suited to the legal industry. And there are groups out there trying to develop, again, sort of open source standards around this that would create industry-wide, not vendor neutral industry-wide standards. And that seems to be the approach we would want to take.
Well, Stephanie makes a good point about the eighth graders. I was reading an article a week or two ago that a lot of the law students that are now entering the workforce are not used to Microsoft Word. They're using Google Docs and those tools, and so they're walking into a completely new and different environment. So you know, who knows? I mean, that could be the harbinger of change down the road.
So somebody in the chat thinks, okay, I thought bringing up eighth graders was a weird marketing angle, but it worked for you, Stephanie. So.
Oh, and I'm not saying, I mean, like, it caught my attention. I'm not saying it sold me on Filevine. It definitely,
no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything and talking about in terms of the PR, it was a little bit all over the board, and some of it hit, some of it didn't, and probably hit for different people. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe by next, maybe when we're back here next week, I'll be able to report on what I've seen, hopefully at this point, because I think I'm going to see it before then. And I'm also heading off to the Net Documents conference in Denver for the next few days. So I'll also be able to report. I think am I the only one of this group that's going to that? I think I am. So until then, everybody has a good week. We'll be back here next week. See you all then.
Have a good weekend all.
Well,